Hey Gear Seekers, I'm Nick. Some TRX 40 boards have started to show up here at the studio, so I decided that I wouldn't just let them show up here, I would actually show them to you. So with that said, in this video we're checking out the TRX 40 Aorus Master that supports Threadripper 3rd Gen CPUs, and it's also a board that's going into my own personal editing workstation. Let's check it out. Before we start this video, I want to make it super clear that this video is not a review. This video is an overview so you can get an idea of the feature set with this board and what physically comes in the box when you buy a brand new motherboard. Now, we know this motherboard's not for everyone. We know that TRX 40 is not for everyone, but yeah, we're showing it because we've got it. Now, we're not doing VRM analysis or board teardowns or anything like that. There are plenty of other channels that cover that stuff, and we're not one of them. So don't ask why we don't do it, because it's just not something that we do here. All right, let's check out this, let's call it a more practical TRX 40 board. All right, the time has arrived. We're unboxing and taking a first look at the TRX 40 Aorus Master from Gigabyte. So let's go ahead and get it out of the box and get it out of the way, and we'll come back to it a little bit later in the video. So let's take a look at what's in the box. First up, we've got all of these awesome Aura stickers for those MLG gamers out there. I don't know why they include gaming stuff with like a workstation grade board. There's a multilingual installation guide. This will basically just help you install the CPU in the socket, and it has it in multiple languages. Pretty straightforward. There is this Aorus badge that I always go on about, but if you do put this on your system, you'll probably get a couple thousand extra FPS if you're gaming with one of these boards, or yeah, your render times will be cut into about a quarter of what they currently are. There is the TRX 40 Aorus Master user manual, but I felt something weird in the manual. Why do they still have this? Get rid of this. Give us a USB stick like the Extreme. Yeah, okay, well, there's a disc. I don't know why they're still doing this. Right, well, let's just take a look at the manual as well, because this will help you just with overclocking and knowing where things are in the BIOS and all of that stuff, and knowing where stuff is on the board. Let's take a look at what's underneath the first hatch. Okay, what we've got here, we've got some Velcro straps for cable management. These are Aorus branded ones, very, very nice. I can do with more of these. Next up is this plethora of M.2 screws. Everyone's complaining that there's a lot of plastic here. I tend to agree that there's just too much going on. Okay, there is a front panel connector. This is the G connector that connects all of your front panel wires into the front panel connector in one block. Makes it nice and easy for installation. Next up, we've got the Wi-Fi 6 antenna for Bluetooth 5.0 and Wi-Fi 6. It's a shark fin. It's very dangerous and very, very scary. I don't know why I said that. All right, let's move along. Let's take a look what's in the other side. Okay, I think we've got some RGB first off the bat. So there's a 12 volt RGB connector and a Corsair RGB converter slash connector that plugs into the 5 volt addressable RGB connector. Very, very nice. Please include these more with these motherboards. Next up, we've got these. These are SATA cables or SATA cables. It depends where you are in the world. I'm not going to hate you if you say it a different way to me, and don't hate me if I say SATA, because that's how it is down under. Rightio. Next up, we've got the temperature probes. Now, these probes plug into your motherboard, and you can put them anywhere in your system so you can get temperature readouts from anywhere else in your case. Very, very handy and very nice for these Threadripper systems. Last but not least is the acoustic microphone. Now, this will pick up sound and adjust fan noise and fan levels and fan speed and all that jazz based on the acoustics of the system. Very, very nice. Okay, let's take a closer look at the TRX 40 Aorus Master. Let's get it out of the plastic so we can get this show on the road. I'm kind of prolonging this because I know how much and how hard it is to wait for this stuff. So yeah, let's take a closer look. When are we taking a closer look? There's a front panel audio connector, there's a 5 volt addressable RGB connector and a 12 volt analog RGB connector. There are 3 PWM fan connectors, 2 USB 2.0 headers for things like AIOs and coolers and that kind of stuff. There's 2 USB 3.2 connectors, and there's a couple more PWM fan connectors right up the end. And by a couple, I mean 2 more. There's 8 SATA or SATA connectors for your spinning rust or your 2.5-inch SSDs. Yes, I'm going to say it again. I say SATA. We're in Australia. That's how we say it. There's a USB Type-C front panel header. There's a front panel connector. So this is where all the wires and cables and stuff plugs in. Gigabytes decided to put it here for some reason. And a 24-pin power connector. There's some more addressable RGB and analog RGB. There's some BIOS switches for the dual BIOS setup that this motherboard has. There's a power button so you can power it on the bench, and some more PWM fan connectors for your AIO and CPU fans. There's a diagnostic screen and 2 EPS power connectors. This has a really massive VRM setup, and this is the same VRM setup that's on the Extreme. The only difference is there's no fan connector on the end for the actively cooled VRM because it's connected elsewhere, and there's an additional PWM fan connector along the end. Right, let's take a look at the PCIe slot. So the top slot is 16 times, then there's an 8 times slot, then another 16 times, then you'll notice there's a tiny little 1 time slot hiding in there, and another 8 time slot right down the bottom. Like X570, TRX 40 also has an actively cooled chipset, and it needs it because of that PCIe Gen 4, because everything on this board is PCIe Gen 4. Let's take off the heat sinks for the M.2 drive so we can take a look at the 3 M.2 slots that live underneath. All right, here we go. There's 3 M.2 slots. One's underneath the top PCIe slot, then underneath the third PCIe slot, and one right underneath the chipset. It's 2019, let's talk about those VRMs. It has a 16 plus 3 phase VRM setup. It's also actively cooled. I did notice this when I pulled the plastic off the top of the IO cover. There's a little fan behind there, and there's also intake for that on the IO shield itself. There's also a heat pipe that connects an additional heatsink that's down near the PCIe slots, goes all the way up to the top, and travels along the back of the IO cover. This is the exact same VRM setup to the TRX 40 Aorus Extreme, so it's nice that they did that on the Master as well. If we flip the board over, you'll also notice, like the Extreme, it also has a full cover backplate that helps with heat dissipation and to evenly spread that heat across the whole back surface of the motherboard. This does actually help with thermals. The board features quad-channel DDR4 RAM, which is pretty standard for these HEDT motherboards. I'm not sure of the RAM speed supported because at the time of filming this video, I don't actually have that information for you yet, but yeah, I might update that in the description of the video. Because this is a TRX 40 board, it only supports Threadripper 3 on the new STRX 4 socket. No Threadripper 1 and 2 support here. Okay, lastly, let's take a look at the rear I/O. Now we've got a Q flash button and a clear CMOS button. You can see the intake for the actively cooled VRM. There's also some USB 3.2. There's also 5 gigabit Ethernet. I don't know why they didn't do 10 gig. There's a USB Type-C connector, an additional 1 gig Ethernet connector. There's also antenna connectors for the Wi-Fi 6 and the Bluetooth 5.0 and 7.1 digital surround sound, as well as an integrated I/O shield. Okay guys, I read and replied to the comments on the TRX 40 Aorus Extreme video, and the sentiment was either that TRX 40 and 3rd gen Threadripper was too expensive, or that the board didn't have enough functionality. Let me make this super clear. TRX 40 and Threadripper is not for everyone, and yes, it's expensive. No one is debating that. Trust me, we know. If you don't have a need for it, then why would you even bother considering it? Most people who comment on those videos either don't or won't ever need an HDT system. Threadripper is designed for bleeding edge workstation use, and it's not for regular users. It's not even for power users. For me personally, I'm going to be upgrading to Threadripper 3. I already use Threadripper 1st and 2nd gen in my workstations, and I'm using this TRX 40 Aorus Master in my new editing rig because Premiere Pro actually uses every single core when you edit and render now. And I've also noticed a trend lately of people complaining about the prices of new hardware getting exponentially more expensive. Guys, advancements in technology cost money. You can argue that not much has changed, but building new factories for new processors and die shrinks and all of that stuff costs money. And at the end of the day, it can be a vendor like Intel, AMD, Nvidia, Corsair, MSI, ASUS, it doesn't matter. People will complain about prices regardless. If you're trying to make a point about things getting more expensive, just stop doing it on the internet because you're not making sense. You need to try and understand why things are getting expensive first. You don't walk into a Gucci store to buy some Gucci stuff and complain that it's too expensive. You're walking into that shop because you know what it costs. And the same thing applies here. The entry point for HDT has always been more expensive. I don't know what you're complaining about. You can't compare it to desktop platforms because they're not the same thing, and they're not for everyone, and they're not even used for the same thing. Anyway, I've said enough. I've had enough of a rant. If you're interested in grabbing the TRX 40 Aorus Master, it will be retailing for around 929 Australian dollars in Australia when it launches. Yes, the Australian dollar price, and I'm going to estimate that the US price is going to be between 600 and 650 US dollars. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, you know what you have to do. You have to tell us what you hated about it. Once again, thank you so very much for watching. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. You peak, we seek. And I just want to congratulate KSI for beating Logan Paul. You deserve it. Thanks for watching.